Well, we're back at the system today. We're trying a couple of different modalities to make allowances for things that people might want to do, special modalities for charging the car, and also trying to operate the system manually. And so what we'll do is we'll go over a little bit here, and then we'll go to the studio and look at it in a greater detail. We'll pull up some graphics and show you what we discovered. What seems to be obvious is that as we saw in the previous video, the advanced modes, they need to offer you a little bit more authority, and what it looks like is that the cost savings mode that they have on there was designed originally for the system to charge off of the grid. And I think that it's probably with no small amount of embarrassment that Tesla has had to disable that. I have a call with a technical service rep, and some of the things that the managers are saying to have the technical service reps tell the public is a little disappointing. Again, we'll go into that later in a video specifically designed for that. But it seems like Tesla dined with the devil on this whole tax rebate thing. And if you're going to dine with the devil, you need a really long spoon. And I think that Tesla tried to get what they wanted in the rebate, but they wound up having to sacrifice. I don't think they fought hard enough for the consumer to get the language put in that would allow for the rebate to be delivered even if the system was getting a majority of its power from solar. So they wound up having it written in there where it had to get all of its power from solar. And so then Tesla, as your friendly gatekeeper, decided then to not allow the system to be able to do one of the things that it was primarily sold to the public as being able to do. Certainly, I based much of the Energy Sovereignty Project calculations on the ability to do that. 2 years ago, when we first ordered the system, when we got everything set up, it was certainly never mentioned that the system would not be able to charge off of the grid. So again, we wanted to offer that to you with the exact same amount of surprise that any consumer would have, and we were certainly surprised by it. But let's not harp on that. Let's go ahead and see what we've got. So as you saw in the previous video, when we set the system to cost savings mode, it was dead. It didn't do anything. And again, I think that mode was probably designed by Tesla to deal with charging off of the grid. In balanced mode, however, we hadn't tried that yet. And so when I was speaking with a friend of mine, Phil, who has a system of Powerwall and solar PV panels, I mentioned to him that it didn't seem like any of these modes were doing anything. And hey, Phil, thanks for hanging out with me the other day. He pointed out that his system was reacting, and he had his on the balanced setting. Okay, well, that was the one setting we hadn't tried yet, and so then I went ahead and after doing a manual test that didn't go so well. Again, we'll go over some of the screenshots and stuff for that. It was kind of a comical thing, made me about lose my mind. But at any rate, so it went over and changed to the balanced mode, and then stayed up to midnight to see what it would do. And sure enough, the system was running off of its batteries up until midnight, and then as soon as cheap power became available, boom, switched over and started running the house on cheap power. Now, that's an interesting thing in and of itself too. One of the things that we're trying to identify now that we know that the system won't charge off of the grid, I'm trying to identify what can we actually do with the system in its current mode, especially since that's how such a system will be delivered to the customers, at least in the foreseeable future. So rather than stomping our foot and whining about the fact that we can't charge off of the grid just yet, or bypassing it with a power supply, which we can do, but the general consumer isn't going to be able to do that. And so, okay, all right, so we're kind of rolling that back a little bit. So instead, what we're doing right now is I'm going through and trying to identify two key points. I'm trying to identify with the amount of solar that we're producing at this time of the year and the amount of battery storage that we have, at what point in the year can I make it completely past the time when power is expensive, that period, well, again, during summer this is all going to change, but you know, that period between about 3 or 4 in the afternoon until 7 or 8 in the evening, again, this is all going to vary between, you know, for everybody. So the first thing that we're doing is we're going to set it broad, because again, everything we want to make here is worst case scenario, right? And so in its broadest sense, what we're doing right now, even though it's winter, we're setting that period of time as between noon and 8 p.m. That's basically how it is in the summer. If we can get past that in the winter, you know, then y'all should be able to make it in, you know, as well. So again, trying to keep this all fair, real world. So that's the first thing that we're trying to identify, is at what point in the year can you just make it past the point where your electricity is expensive? Can you make it to, you know, again, in our case, from noon to 8 p.m. Then at what point can you make it so that you're on, you get that not only the peak time, but also what's called at shoulder time, where it's a little less expensive than peak time, but it's still not like you get from midnight on, at least here. And so then we're going to, you know, obviously identify that period as well. You know, when can you make it from noon to midnight, right? So I'm sorry, that was heaped in with the first thing that we're trying to identify. What time of year can you get it past the time when your utilities are expensive? And the second thing that we want to identify as part of the Energy Sovereignty Project is at what point in the year, at this latitude and this production, can we make it at all through the entire day? In other words, we're running the entire the system on battery power and solar the entire time that that we're not producing, right? So you wind up having the entire day. At what point can we get past what we've collected in solar to not only fill the, you know, not only keep the batteries neutral in charge, but then also start to identify how much power we can shunt off to fuel the car, if you will. And so at that point, the Energy Sovereignty Project will really kind of get its legs, and everybody will see what we're trying to accomplish here. So with that, let's go ahead and go back to the studio, and we'll take a look at some of those other modalities that I mentioned. Charging, one of them was I knew that I was going to be making a trip the following day, and so I knew the car was going to start charging. I had actually set the car to start charging about 2:33 in the morning. I can't remember what it was. We can look at the screenshots. And I wanted the system to be able to switch over to battery power, so that the battery power that I've stored up with sunlight would then be able to be consumed by the car even at 2 in the morning. And so that kind of sets the tone for how things are going to go when we are in the summer and we have plenty of power to do that kind of thing. So that we'll discuss, and then some of the manual things as well. So let's pop over to the studio and see what we've got. Oh boy, we have a lot to cover. So let's get to it. So, as I left the system just a little while ago, I might have been a little bit too optimistic of my thoughts that the balanced setting would actually work. So, as we started this off, I mentioned that I had changed the mode setting after speaking with that friend of mine, Phil. and he was using the balanced setting in the advanced menu, and he was having success with that, and showed me, you know, the graphs of his usage, some of that, and so I think the issue though is that with his system, he's running a single Powerwall, and I think that when you're running one or two Powerwalls, that the system is using a different logic, standard reason, than what is going to be the most efficient way to run a system that has 3, 4, 5, 6 of the Powerwalls. And so that, I think, is probably a part of why the balanced mode was giving some issues. But the thing that becomes clear is that we just don't have the dynamic controls to be able to adjust the system to do what we need it to do when we need it to do it. We'll get into that a little bit later, but before we get into that, let me go into a couple of other issues that aren't so involved, that they're, you know, really kind of easier to understand. So the day before yesterday, I had some errands to run, and I knew that I was going to need to charge the car to 100%. And so I thought, okay, well, that'd be kind of a neat little experiment to run the car off of stored battery power instead of just pulling it off of the house current. So I figured, okay, what I'll do is I'll set my alarm for 2 in the morning and wake up and make the adjustment, and the car was already set to start charging around 3:30. So again, when you make your adjustments, usually takes about a half an hour or so. Tesla says an hour, but I found that it's generally between a half an hour and an hour. But there are those occasions where it can take longer. We'll get into that too. But 2 a.m. rolls around, and well, let's cue up the video that I did at 2 in the morning, all bleary-eyed. Well, welcome back. So it's the echo is in the garage here. I'm trying not to wake anybody up. It's 3:17 in the morning, and the communications issue, the indirect communications between the Tesla Powerwall and the consumer, the owner, is turning out to be a little bit more of a problem than I had thought. So I'm in the garage with the car right now, and I set the car so that it would start charging at 3:30 to 100%. I've got a trip to make today. And so I thought, oh, okay, well, I know what I'll do. I'll wake up, set my alarm, wake up briefly, and set the system so that it'll go to self-powered just before the car starts charging. And so then the idea there is that then I'll pull the charge off of the battery a little bit to top the car up instead of in the house. So I thought, oh, nice experiment. Well, the problem is that there's no way. I'll take a screenshot here, updated yesterday. Got good bars on the Wi-Fi. I don't know if that's the issue, so I'm going to go ahead and get a Wi-Fi extender to see if that'll help matters out. But I'm stuck. There's no way for me to directly interact with the system, and so even though it's right here, there's no way for me to say, hey, all right, bypass all of this and change your mode. So that might be that might turn into a little bit more of an issue than I thought. And I'm trying everything that I can think of, restarting the application and all the things that have worked in the past to kind of knock it loose. So I don't know if maybe their website's down or what, but if you're in a situation where you absolutely need to change something over, you might not you might find that you're not able to do that. So there we go. I guess either it'll respond before the car charges or it won't. So as you can see, that didn't work out so well. I wound up having to charge the car off of grid power for a little while until the system actually was able to connect and do the switch. And so, you know, we're using a Wi-Fi network that can sometimes be a little spotty. So since then I've gotten a Wi-Fi booster to try and help things out, see if that helps a little better. But you know, again, so that's not necessarily Tesla's fault if somebody has a spotty Wi-Fi connection, but it still just suggests that Tesla needs to have some kind of a manual connection. You know, I have a couple of Wi-Fi cameras and some other devices that have Bluetooth connectivity. They have their own their own Wi-Fi portal so that you can log on to them directly. All of this is, you know, all these solutions are available to Tesla to add to their gateway so that you have some kind of local control over your system. I think that's going to be absolutely absolutely imperative moving forward. But you know, again, we can talk about that, you know, in months to come, and you know, all that, you know, kind of falls into the, you know, into that acceptable category that we, you know, spoke about earlier. But on the plus side, the system did respond really quickly when it finally did go into self-powered mode. It only took about 10 minutes here. So we'll pull up a couple of screenshots here, and then this one here afterwards. And again, you can see it only took about 10 minutes or so, and it was fine. So the other thing that I wanted to touch on before, you know, we kind of go into the more daunting stuff, it has to do with manual adjustments and the speed at which the system will respond. Again, that half an hour to an hour kind of a deal. So when I was out running some errands, I was still running some experiments on the advanced setting, and we're looking at, you know, what the difference is between cost savings and that. And I already knew that the cost savings was failing. It wasn't actually going to switch over like it was supposed to. And so I figured, okay, so what I'm going to do is at 11:45, I'm going to manually put it into self-powered mode with the reserve for the power outage set to 0. Right, and so in the previous video, you know, we discussed what that does. Without that reserve, when you do your self power, it's not looking to save any power. So boom, soon as you know, as soon as that setting is done, it shuts off the grid, and you then go into a mode where either the battery is supplying the power, or the solar is supplying the power, or both. In the case of an overage, if you're overproducing in your solar, some of that will go into the battery. So when I checked in just after noon, after, you know, setting us, it's been about 15 minutes. Here's what we see, and you know, okay, well, we knew that it was going to take time, and so the good news is that it was communicating, unlike, you know, with the situation with trying to charge the battery. I was actually able to communicate with the app, so that's the good news. But what I wasn't expecting was for it to take 2.5 hours. So here's one of the screenshots here. That's checking in just before, and then here is the modality that I was looking for once it finally did accept it. All right, and so that, you know, what you see there, that's the situation that I wanted to set it at. So wow, you know, at some point between 2 p.m. and 2:15, the system actually did make the change. This after consuming 3 kilowatt hours needlessly from the grid. And so this graph here shows a little more clearly. You can see this little gray section there past noon where we kept consuming power off of the grid. That gray bar area there, that shows the consumption of the grid. The yellow is showing our solar production. The green is showing the Powerwall's activity. When it dips low, it's being charged. When it rises up, it's being discharged. And so I'm hoping that we can find some mode setting eventually where I can get the system to actually do what I want it to do when I want it to do it. But currently it looks like it's going to wind up being a manual affair for a little while at least. I'll go into that at the very end when I close out here. But the important part here is to understand that the system knows that I'm producing more power than the home is using. And there should be a way to set the system to recognize that automatically and power the home with it and charge the batteries with the excess, leaving the grid out of it. Shut the grid off. It's winter. But these kind of all this kind of falls into the acceptable category. We're talking about that in that previous video. Where I kind of categorize things in the grand scheme of things. Both the connectivity issue and this delay, this lag that we have, they're annoying, but they're easily solvable. Eventually they will be solved, and they're acceptable so long as that they actually do eventually solve them. And I think they will. I mean, this is kind of low-hanging fruit. That's not a big issue. But let's talk about something that is. This whole scheduling debacle. What a mess. So I'm going to keep at this, but I still haven't been able to get the system to respond to any kind of a time of use scheme, either cost saving settings or the balance settings. I haven't seen it demonstrate to me that there is any difference between the two. It almost seems like when they knew that they weren't going to be able to charge off of the grid, that they just mimicked the setting and just kind of dragged that section of code over and called it cost savings. Because I haven't really seen any difference between the two. But there is one thing that it does successfully. So after I spoke with Phil, I went back and tried the balance setting, and approaching midnight, just before midnight, that is what we get, right? And then at the stroke of midnight, boom, there we go. Wow, it seemed to be working. That made my night. In the morning I was very happy. Looking forward to how the system then might transition at noon. But it did what it was supposed to. It went from a situation where, while running on expensive power up until midnight, it would be powering off of the battery, and then at midnight, again this time of year, since we can't charge directly off of the grid, we have to then use grid power when it's cheap, and then in those morning hours between the time that the system starts producing and the time that power gets expensive, you can get your maximum amount of charge by powering the home with the utility power when it's cheap, while at the same time your solar production is going straight into your batteries, because remember, the amount of production, the amount of power that you'll actually be able to charge through the system is limited by how much solar power you're producing. That's kind of the best way to look at it. If your system is producing 2 kilowatts, then that's all that the gateway will allow you to charge in. If it's producing 7, then the system will allow it to charge at 7. Silly, but that's the way it is. So here we see that it went from a point where you're charging off of the battery to grid power at midnight, just like it was supposed to. So then we look at what it did at noon, and my excitement was short-lived. here's what we have just before noon. And so there, it's looking good. It's running the house off of inexpensive power, like we discussed. And then this happened at noon. Unbelievable. I was so shocked by this that I actually took a screen video movie of it. I just couldn't believe it. Unreal. What the hell does it think it's doing? Honestly, really, you're sending my best production to the grid, that same grid that won't let me purchase power, but you're going to send it to the grid when I need it. Wow. And then to add insult to injury, remember what we were talking about before, about the lag. Well, you guessed it. Once I noticed this criminal behavior, I tried to set the system to self-power mode with a 100% reserve battery so that it would put it into the mode that I needed it to do. And it took nearly an hour for the system to actually swap modes over from that manual setting. And so that resulted in 2.5 kilowatt hours that should have gone straight into my battery, went right out the wires. So who the hell programmed it to do this? Given what friggin' set of circumstances? The battery knew that it had been discharging. The system knows that it's crippled and won't allow me to charge off of the grid. So, here's a note to Tesla staff. Fix this. Give me control over what the batteries actually do and when. And so, if this sounds like a bit too much bitching about nothing, I want you to consider this. Let me pull up a couple of screenshots here. This is a screenshot from a $200 Nest thermostat. Here's another one. This is showing some of the other settings that you have, system settings, and here's the calendar that we've got. All right. So are we supposed to believe that a $5,000 Powerwall can't offer the same sophisticated tools available to a $200 thermostat? Hell, my Blink doorbell has better connectivity and more control over what it does than the Powerwall does. I can control every aspect of my thermostat, controlling the temperature settings. I have instant access through the portal, through their, the direct connection from the app. And, as you see, I've, all these settings for, time of day, when it does, what it does. So, how many Powerwall systems are there out there? They can't possibly, I'm betting that there's not nearly as many as for this friggin' thermostat. And so, okay, I get it. The Powerwall is a more complex system, and there's more at stake. Tesla's a new company. The last thing they need is someone monkeying around with the systems, changing it too fast, and catching the damn thing on fire or something. I get it. But the lack of control over this system and what it does when it does is just frankly inexcusable. It falls squarely into that unacceptable category. If people knew that it was this bad when they're trying to do a larger system, and again, it's probably fine. One Powerwall, two Powerwalls, you set it, you blindly follow the way that Tesla has it set up out of the box, and you're all good. But man, for what we're seeing right now, this needs to be improved, and it needs to be improved fast. This isn't something that Tesla can wait on. If the main PV inverter had been working correctly, I would have driven home and shut the thing off, shut the main utility power off manually. I was that pissed off. So, unfortunately, we don't have the ability to produce solar when the system's islanded currently. I'll talk a little bit more about that when I close out the video, but that's kind of one of the things that we're stubbing our toe on right now. We'll get there. We'll fix it. So for now, I'm just going to chip away at this and see if I can find at least one modality or trick that allows us to set the system for a time of use, that gives us some, some controls. But we're probably just going to have to do things manually for the time being. But so at any rate, that brings us to today. So today we have this. So this morning I wanted to do another experiment with the cost saving settings. The previous setting that I was using was a bit severe, and after looking at the way Phil had his set up using the shoulder time, right, where the power is more expensive than off peak, but not quite as expensive as your peak time, this system, the web application allows you to be able to set it up so that that is part of it. And I thought, okay, so maybe I'm messing something up, and so I set it to something that looked a little more normal. But what I did do was this. So if you look at this screenshot here, what you'll see that I did was I set the system to think that my peak time, where the power gets expensive, starts at 7:30. Now my thought was, again, coming off of that high from the previous evening, where I had set the thing and it had, it had gone into the correct mode. I watched the system turn over at midnight. It was doing what I thought it should do, and at 7:30 a.m. what I had wanted it to do was that if it had worked correctly, that it would then at 7:30 start to assist the home. It would go to battery power, but then as solar came on, it would start to slowly assist the home, and then eventually it would take over control. The battery would be eliminated from the situation as the amount of solar that we produced matched what the home was using. And then as it exceeded the home use, it would then start to charge the battery. Logical. For those of you that have been following along here, please tell me if I'm misguided in thinking that that would be the logical path. I had 76% of charge from the previous evening, something like 65 kilowatt hours or something like that. The reserve was set to 70, so my state of charge is above what I have left, and the system was told that it was on peak time. What am I missing? So here's a screenshot prior to 7:30. Boom. And here's what happened after 7:30. Boom. Here's another video clip. Look familiar? Well, it should, because it's the same crap logic as when the advanced setting was set to balanced. Every one of these modes seems to be set to favor the utility, not favor the customer. In winter, it's sending power to the grid. When the battery isn't full. When the system knows that the previous 7 days didn't create as much power from solar as the home used. So, as we saw before, if I alter the amount of reserve on the charge, I can force a situation where the battery will charge off of cheap grid power, or I can set it so that the system will run off of the battery. But there is no time-based method to switch between a self-powered mode and eliminate the grid influence between self-powered and either a cost savings or there's no way to do that manually. So that brings us to what happened next. Obviously, as soon as I recognize this outright theft of resources, I go to change it. Simple, right? Well, just when I tried to switch mode, the exact same thing that happened with the car battery. All of a sudden, I have a mysterious loss of connection. Boom. And what you can notice right here is if you look at the gray area, the gray Powerwall behind, you'll notice the 0% next to the battery. And that's your first indication, at least what I've noticed, is the first indication that, oh, you're not talking. So My goal then became to wait it out. Maybe it did actually correct itself, right? Without without needing my manual input. Maybe it, figured it out and wasn't really sending all that power straight to the grid when it could have been burning my house on it. Excuse me. So the reason I wanted to make sure that it checked back in before going on this rant was because the Powerwall system, it consists of 3 parts. The first part is your phone application, right? That is basically your HMI, or your human machine interface, your way of actually making changes to the system and then getting feedback as far as what the results of that change are. The second part is the Tesla portal, and that acts as a go-between for commands. So you give it, you give it a command, and then the Tesla app, the Tesla web-based portal, then parses those commands and then makes the final, sends the final signal to the gateway. And this is also where your public utilities will send their signals. And it's also where Tesla has crippled the system to make it so that it simply won't send certain commands to the gateway. And then lastly, obviously, you have the gateway, and the gateway acts as the local communications hub for the system. The gateway monitors and stores all the data that the batteries are going to send to Tesla. So if you do have a loss of connection or what have you, it will actually store some of that information. So when it does have a connection, it can send that information on out. So I felt it was important to give them the benefit of every doubt and make sure that communication goes both ways, right? Give it time to actually know, so I get the feedback through all those channels that it is settled into a modality before I make some definitive statement about what was actually going on or what should have been going on. So here we go. Boom. Wasn't until about 10:19 that the system gave me confirmation that it was still ripping me off. So because that was still what it was doing, I made the change. And again, just like before, the confirmation it went through pretty quickly. It made the change by 10:25, so 6 minutes or so. So this graph here, I'll pull up this screenshot here. That shows when it, that it actually did take the correct modality, running the system from solar while charging the battery off of the excess. This is what it should have done automatically, but didn't. And then this graph shows the result of that whole mess. 2.3 kilowatts sent needlessly to the grid while on cost savings mode. Set so it should have recognized that it was on expensive power. So that's So as we draw this video to a close, it's gone on long enough already. I want to leave you with what I discussed before, my thermostat. Through this entire time that I was going through this second one, I wanted to make sure that it wasn't my Wi-Fi connection. And so I was making adjustments to my Nest thermostat, both by using my Wi-Fi connection and also by shutting off my Wi-Fi connection and using the wireless, the phone data connection, the exact same way that I was doing with the Tesla app, trying to bounce back and forth to get something to connect. Well, here's my thermostat. Boom. That's one of them. Boom. Here's the other one. There's no issue at all connecting to my thermostat, manipulating that. So, as we go, I'll come up with a punch list of things that I think Tesla really does need to work on, both on their hardware end and their software end. And we'll see if, maybe we can get something knocked loose. Obviously, it's consumers, it's people that are going to be bringing this information to light that's what's going to ultimately get this stuff fixed. If they don't think there's a problem, then they're just going to continue on happily like there isn't one. So let's close this off for now by saying currently our plan is that we're going to set the system up to either a cost savings or balance mode and control how the system handles that change in the evening, and then during the day I'm just going to physically shut off the grid. That's going to give me some joy. But earlier, I mentioned about the PV inverter, was the photovoltaic inverter was not working correctly yet. So we have an appointment on January 3rd. Sunworks is going to be coming back to see if they can work out what's going on with that. Currently there's some kind of a battle going on between the Powerwalls and the SolarEdge inverter that we have, and so when we shut off the mains, for whatever reason, it knocks out our solar production, gives us a frequency fault on the inverter. So we're going to try and work through that. So we'll do a soft start to the energy sovereignty project. Raise a glass of absinthe to y'all, and thank you very much for wading through all of this and supporting us through our trials and tribulations of trying to get this all set up and presented. And then we'll probably do a February 1st as kind of a firm start to the system, where we're actually able to start off our first billing period, where we'll actually have some control authority over the system and how the batteries charge. So I'll keep you all posted. Thank you very much for following along with this. Be sure to like and subscribe. If this is the first video that you're seeing, kick on back, watch some of the other videos, see how it was that we got to this point in the first place, and we'll keep bringing these to you.